For decades, the Arctic sat at the edge of global strategy. Remote, frozen, and largely ignored. That era is over. In 2026, Canada quietly committed nearly $80 billion to reshape how the Arctic is defended, monitored, and controlled. This wasn't a reaction to a crisis. It wasn't driven by headlines. It was strategic, calculated, and deeply consequential. So why did this move catch Washington off guard, and what does it reveal about the future balance of power? Welcome to Geocapitalist. In today's video, Canada's $80 billion Arctic defense move Washington didn't expect. We break down the long-term strategy behind Canada's most consequential northern investment in decades. If you value evidence-based analysis of geopolitics and the global economy, subscribe to stay ahead of what's coming. For much of the 20th century, the Arctic existed more as a map feature than a strategic arena. Harsh conditions limited commercial activity, military presence remained sparse, and global economic flows bypassed the region almost entirely. That assumption no longer holds. Climate shifts, technological advances, and rising geopolitical risk have transformed the Arctic from a peripheral zone into a central variable in global strategy. New shipping routes are shortening transit times between major markets. Critical minerals essential to the global economy are becoming accessible. Undersea cables carrying financial data and international trade communications increasingly cross northern waters. In strategic terms, the Arctic is no longer empty space, it is infrastructure. This transformation creates a dilemma. Who monitors these routes? Who protects the seabed? Who enforces economic policy when competition intensifies in fragile regions? These are not abstract questions. They shape financial markets, supply chains, and long-term geopolitical stability. Canada sits at the center of this shift. With the world's longest Arctic coastline, it cannot afford ambiguity. The decision to invest heavily in Arctic defense is not about militarization. It is about governance, deterrence, and credibility. When economic value moves north, strategic responsibility follows. The real question is not why Canada acted, but why others assumed it wouldn't. $80 billion is not a symbolic number. It signals intent, duration, and institutional commitment. Canada's Arctic defense move is not a single procurement decision. It is a layered investment spread across decades, integrating naval capability, surveillance systems, infrastructure, and alliance interoperability. This scale matters because it transforms policy from aspiration into permanence. At its core, the investment addresses a structural gap. Canada's existing Arctic posture was designed for a different era, one defined by limited traffic, minimal competition, and lower geopolitical risk. Today's Arctic demands continuous monitoring, under-ice awareness, and rapid response across vast distances. That requires modern submarines, maritime patrol aircraft, satellite coverage, and hardened logistics nodes capable of operating year-round. Importantly, this spending also stabilizes long-term economic planning. Defense infrastructure supports international trade by protecting shipping corridors and digital networks. It reassures financial markets by reducing uncertainty in critical regions, and it aligns economic policy with security realities rather than treating them as separate domains. The $80 billion commitment therefore functions as a strategic anchor. It locks Canada into the Arctic as a permanent steward, not a temporary participant. And once that commitment is made, expectations shift among allies, competitors, and global investors alike. From Washington's perspective, Canada's Arctic posture has long been viewed as supportive but secondary. The assumption was not indifference, but predictability. Canada would align, coordinate, and reinforce existing frameworks, rather than independently reshape the strategic map. The $80 billion Arctic defense move disrupted that assumption. What made this unexpected was not the partnership aspect, but the autonomy. Canada's strategy was designed first around sovereign control, not symbolic contribution. It emphasized under-ice capability, persistent surveillance, and command over northern approaches. areas traditionally underweighted in continental defense planning. This reframing matters. In strategic planning circles, surprise rarely comes from confrontation. It comes from quiet capability shifts. Canada's move altered calculations around burden sharing, Arctic governance, and long-term force posture. It suggested that Ottawa was no longer content to treat the Arctic as an extension of Allied strategy, but as a domain requiring independent stewardship. This does not weaken alliances, it recalibrates them. When partners invest decisively in their own regions, collective security becomes more resilient. Yet it also forces adjustment. Established assumptions about who leads, who follows, and who underwrites stability begin to change. That is what Washington did not fully anticipate, and why this move reverberated far beyond the Arctic itself. In the Arctic, visibility is limited, distances are vast, and response times are unforgiving. That reality elevates one capability above nearly all others: submarines. Unlike surface vessels or aircraft, submarines provide persistence without presence. They monitor, deter, and signal control without escalating tension. In a region where stability depends on restraint, that distinction is critical. Canada's Arctic defense strategy places under-ice capability at its center. This is not accidental. Submarines offer the only reliable means to operate beneath ice cover while tracking activity across choke points and deep water approaches. They protect undersea infrastructure, monitor foreign movements, and provide decision-makers with continuous situational awareness, an asset with direct implications for geopolitical risk management. From an economic perspective, submarines also safeguard the invisible architecture of the global economy. Financial transactions, energy flows, and international trade increasingly rely on seabed cables and pipelines. Disruption in these systems would reverberate through financial markets and global supply chains within hours. By prioritizing this domain, Canada signals that Arctic security is not about dominance but continuity. It is about ensuring that economic systems function without interruption, even as competition intensifies. In strategic terms, submarines transform geography into leverage, quietly, persistently, and decisively. While Canada's Arctic move is sovereign by design, it is not isolated. One country in particular plays a subtle but consequential role: Norway, not as a headline partner but as a strategic reference point. Norway has spent decades operating in cold, contested maritime environments where deterrence depends on credibility rather than scale. That experience matters. Norway's Arctic posture is built on integration, aligning naval assets, surveillance, and infrastructure into a single operational system. Canada's approach increasingly reflects that logic. Rather than dispersing resources, the emphasis is on interoperability, endurance, and domain awareness. This alignment reduces friction within NATO while preserving national control. From a geopolitical standpoint, Norway offers a model for balancing cooperation and autonomy. It demonstrates how smaller, advanced economies can shape regional security without overextension. For Canada, this reinforces a broader lesson. Arctic stewardship is not about matching superpowers. It is about managing risk, protecting economic arteries, and setting rules early. In that sense, Norway's influence is less about hardware and more about strategy, quiet, deliberate, and effective. Arctic security is often framed in military terms, but its deeper impact is economic. As polar routes become viable, they begin to reshape international trade patterns. Shorter transit times between Europe, Asia, and North America reduce costs, alter logistics planning, and shift competitive advantage. These changes ripple through the global economy long before they appear in headlines. Canada's Arctic defense investment functions as economic insurance. By securing northern routes and infrastructure, it lowers geopolitical risk for trade flows that will increasingly pass through high-latitude waters. This stability matters to insurers, shipping firms, and financial markets that price uncertainty into every transaction. There is also a regulatory dimension. Emission controls, environmental standards, and monitoring regimes are becoming tools of economic governance in the Arctic. States with the capacity to enforce them shape who participates and under what conditions. Defense capability, in this context, underwrites economic policy. The result is a feedback loop. Security enables commerce. Commerce justifies infrastructure. Infrastructure reinforces strategic presence. Canada's $80 billion move recognizes this cycle early, positioning the country not just as a defender of territory, but as a guarantor of economic continuity in an emerging global corridor. One of the most misunderstood aspects of Canada's Arctic defense move is its impact on alliances. At first glance, a large autonomous investment can be misread as a shift away from coordination. In reality, it does the opposite. It strengthens alliances by reducing dependency and increasing credibility. In NATO, contribution is measured less by alignment statements and more by capability. When a country demonstrates that it can secure its own strategic domain, collective planning becomes more balanced. Canada's Arctic investment signals that it is prepared to shoulder responsibility proportional to its geography and economic standing. This has implications beyond defense. Alliance credibility influences financial confidence, long-term investment decisions, and diplomatic leverage. Countries that manage their own risk effectively are seen as more reliable partners in international trade and economic policy coordination. For Washington and other allies, Canada's move clarifies roles rather than complicating them. It establishes the Arctic as a shared concern, but not a shared blind spot. And in an era where geopolitical risk increasingly intersects with economic stability, that clarity is an asset, not a disruption. Canada's $80 billion Arctic defense move is best understood not as a response to pressure, but as a recalibration of responsibility. It reflects a recognition that geography is no longer neutral. In a world shaped by shifting trade routes, fragile infrastructure, and rising geopolitical risk, regions once considered remote now sit at the center of long-term strategy. This investment changes expectations. It signals that Arctic governance will be defined by those willing to commit resources early, set standards, and maintain presence over decades. It also reframes power. Influence is no longer measured solely by scale or confrontation, but by endurance, coordination, and foresight. For Canada, the Arctic becomes more than territory. It becomes a strategic platform, one that connects defense planning with economic policy, international trade, and financial stability. That integration is what gives the move its weight. The most consequential strategies are often the least dramatic. They do not announce themselves through crisis, but through quiet permanence. Canada's Arctic decision belongs in that category, and as global attention continues to move north, its implications will compound, slowly, predictably, and decisively. And there you have it, Canada's $80 billion Arctic defense move Washington didn't expect. This was not a sudden reaction or a symbolic gesture. It was a long-term strategic decision grounded in geography, economic reality, and a changing global balance. As the Arctic becomes more central to international trade, financial markets, and geopolitical risk, the countries that invest early will shape the rules others must follow. If this kind of data-driven, evidence-based analysis of the global economy is valuable to you, make sure to watch our next video. It connects directly to the forces now unfolding beneath the surface. Subscribe to Geocapitalist and share this with someone who still believes only superpowers determine global outcomes. See you in the next video.